It's been 1 decade since The Division first released. Crazy, right? What's crazier is that the game still has an active and thriving player population. If you don't believe me, look at me sitting in queue here while I was getting ready to jump in for the night. What makes The Division so good? What brings players back despite a sequel that offers more in just about every way? I wanted to see for myself, and this required not only a full playthrough, but also spending some time in the endgame. When The Division released in 2016, it did pretty well critically, netting a Metacritic score of 80 and selling over 10 million copies to date, an absolute success in every way for Ubisoft. The looter shooter genre was already established, and powerhouse franchises like Borderlands and Destiny were leading the way. The Division was the new kid on the block, unproven and unknown, but adopting a modern day setting along with a more realistic framing helped in creating an audience for the game. Personally, I dabbled a bit in The Division, never really sat there and grinded it. In fact, when it first came out, I didn't even finish the game. But I remained curious, and videos like Nikita's reaching the endgame in The Division 1 sparked my interest once again. So, with the newly updated version available for PS5, essentially patching the game to make it 60 frames per second, there was really no better time to get into it. So to start, I had to play my way through the story. The opening cutscene was nothing short of amazing. The story may sound familiar based on events we've experienced in real life not too long ago.
Earliest appears to be a previously unknown variant of the flu, catching many experts off guard.
A man-made virus is created and spread amongst the citizens of New York, specifically on Black Friday, a day where cash exchanges hands like no other. Cash would serve as the primary vector, the main way to spread the disease with brutal efficiency. New York subsequently falls, and the world is essentially stuck in a snapshot of what chaos ensued once the flu spread. The bodies piled up, and any sort of control was completely and utterly lost. The version of New York is almost post-apocalyptic, setting the stage for one of the best worlds Ubisoft has ever crafted, at least in my opinion. The Division is sent in to re-establish law and order, a group of civilians who are clearly very well trained in combat and called upon when the world is on the brink of total collapse. So that's the setup, but is the story actually any good? Well, yes and no. The premise is really interesting. New York has fallen due to the dollar flu, and what's left is a city in complete ruin. Your job as a Division agent is to systematically establish a base of operations, upgrade it as you see fit, take down rival factions indiscriminately, while also attempting to uncover the root cause of the virus and who was behind the whole thing. You're considered to be a part of the second wave of Division agents, meaning a first wave has already gone in and has failed at their duty. Some have gone missing, some are dead, and some have gone rogue. The pacing of the story is solid, but the way the story is told isn't what I expected or anticipated. The story is largely told through a number of different echoes, which are these recreations of events using holograms. You get voice recordings, small clip snippets, and a ton of environmental storytelling. The narrative isn't driven by cutscenes. In fact, it's really rare to even get one. This can lead to a bit of disconnect for the player. Personally, if I found myself losing focus for a minute, I would completely forget what reason I was doing a particular mission for. You get talked to a lot in this game, often by voice comms for mission briefings and so on. However, your character is silent, never responds one way or another. The whole silent protagonist thing has always been a pet peeve of mine. I'd much rather have my players speak their mind, but I guess it allows for some personal immersion that would be lost if the character had a voice. So the base of operations serves as a central piece to the main story. Each main mission relates to one of 3 different wings that you'll upgrade: the medical wing, the tech wing, and the security wing. Each wing has 5 associated main missions. Each mission tackles a key part of the story. I'll get into the progression side of things a bit later. To start, the primary goal is securing the key personnel to man these different wings.
Dr. Candle and her staff. We need those personnel.
The medical wing is led by Jessica Candle, a virologist who is leading the research to uncover the source of the flu and containing the outbreak. The tech wing is led by Alex Rhodes, an engineering and systems expert who establishes comms and other tech upgrades. And the security wing is led by Roy Benitez, the commander of the JTF, otherwise known as the Joint Task Force, He helps in coordinating military and police forces to engage with the factions running the streets. There are other characters who stand out in terms of importance, such as Fei Lao, a recognizable name if you're familiar with the series, but she does absolutely nothing in this game other than be injured and volunteer you for different missions. Like, she's genuinely useless in ways I can't even begin to describe, but I'll cut her some slack because we did get blown up in the beginning of the game. I did ask whether or not the story was good at the beginning of this section, and honestly, like, it's fine. I never felt compelled to really uncover the secret behind the virus. My main driving force was upgrading the different wings to unlock new skills and modifications for them. To put it simply, you get out what you put in. The world is very immersive, which in turn made me want to learn more about how things turned out the way they did. Who are the cleaners? What about the Rikers and the LMB? Those are the questions I was asking. In general, the world building is great, but the ending had very little payoff. The game sort of just abruptly ends. There isn't any real big lead up to the final mission, and once you do complete it, the game sort of just continues and tells you to get to level 30 if you aren't there already, and a lot of plot points just feel underdeveloped in the end. The whole central mystery revolving around the origin of the virus didn't really get much of a conclusion, and any villains that the game did have didn't really get much screen time at all. In general, The Division is not a game that I would play for the story alone. New York, however, as a setting is wonderful. In fact, I'm willing to say that this is the best work Ubisoft has ever done in terms of world design. They did a fantastic job capturing a snapshot of a city in ruin. Cars abandoned everywhere, storefronts broken and looted, the collapse of modern society perfectly encapsulated. The city of New York is a perfect playground for this type of game. There are two things that really stood out to me. Firstly, the interiors. The actual level design of the main missions really stood out. There is a real sense of variety in the locations you visit. Madison Square Garden, which is the home of the Knicks in real life, showcases an arena repurposed as a massive hospital of some sort. Even here we can see how chaos has enveloped it. The JTF has lost control and the Rikers have moved in. The Lexington Event Center looks like something completely out of Gotham. These are just some examples of level design that just excels. I will admit though, not all are as good as these. The rooftop missions, in my opinion, are often the most mundane and boring to get through, but I understand the need for a change of pace. Second thing that stood out to me was the design of the city itself. By far the most important thing for Ubisoft was to nail down the look and feel, and that's something that they knocked out of the park. The different districts feel distinct, landmarks in popular touristy areas like Times Square are here, and walking up and down any city block just looks and feels so good. Outside of the main missions, there's a whole underground portion to the game, and just like the city above, this is also well detailed. The day-night cycle adds to the immersion of it all, with nighttime being an especially impressive accomplishment. The snow effects are awesome. The snow piles up on you and the city around you, impacting visibility. I do wish there were more weather effects, but it makes sense that we only get snow considering the season. There's something lonely about wandering in New York City. Sure, there are some citizens that'll come up and ask for help or need some different supplies, and yes, there are encounters that can pop up, but the city genuinely feels lonely at times. In a good way. One of my favorite things to do in this game was to slowly stroll up a city block and just take it all in. There are a few games that I enjoy doing this in, and The Division is at the top of the list. The Division is a looter shooter. One of the keywords there being looter. I think this is the portion of the game that I had my biggest issue with. Let me explain. Most looters have your typical treadmill of increasing rarity and power. As you level, the loot drops get better and more rare. This is also true for The Division, but in my opinion, it has one of the most unrewarding loot systems I've ever come across in any game, at least early on. See, I kept track of when I was getting certain rarities of loot and how powerful that loot was. Loot in this game is distinguished by colors. Gray is common, green is uncommon, and so on, up to exotic, which is the highest rarity. I didn't start getting rare drops until I was around level 10, almost 7 hours in. This was pretty damn bad. For a game that has such an emphasis on loot, I would have expected to start getting at least some rare drops earlier, around level 5 or so. I'd kill purple or gold enemies and expect better drops, but this was often not the case. They're harder and more demanding to kill, but the reward was often non-existent or extremely lackluster. The game just felt unrewarding up until I started getting my first purple drops, and those came in when I was practically done with the game at level 29, nearly 15 hours in. Obviously, this isn't something that's ever going to be fixed, but it's something that I personally felt impacted my enjoyment of the game. The upgrades were so tiny and incremental that I never felt like I was able to experiment with different playstyles. I was always just waiting for the drops to come. However, on the flip side, everything felt earned in a weird way. Like I was scraping together good enough loot to take on the next mission. I relied heavily on the vendors, selling outdated and out-leveled gear for scraps of currency just to get to the next small upgrade. As much as I disliked the slow and almost non-existent progression, something felt oddly good about putting together all my resources to craft that new vest or buy that new gun. This sentiment, however, gets completely flipped on its head once you reach level 30 and subsequently endgame. The loot shower begins and never ends. I couldn't kill 5 enemies without getting a high-end drop. Those were colored yellow. The high-end gear comes with a number of different affixes. They'll have minor or major attributes along with different perks that activate based on how much stamina, firepower, or electronic power you have. More on that in a bit. Things pick up once you complete the game and they never stop, but it just feels so strange to me. Like, why not shower the player with rewarding loot as they progress through the main game, rather than once they reach the end game and likely will be putting the game down after the story. That being said, the loot game and build variety is quite nice. Once you reach the end game, your level doesn't matter anymore. It's all about power level. The higher the power level, the more damage you can dish out and take in. What I especially liked is that outside of the high-end gear, there are also gear sets. The gear sets pretty much define the build that you're going for. Playing in groups, this is especially important. What I noticed, however, as I kept playing and getting better and better gear, is that at some point, the power level doesn't matter as much as the percentages associated with your attributes. For example, if a 300 power level item gives you a +5 crit chance, and my 250 power level item gives me a +8, I'd obviously take the 250 power level item despite the other having a higher power. Does that make sense? Anyway, the chase for loot felt amazing in the end game. Like, I literally couldn't put the game down and start writing the script because I want to keep finding better and better gear. I do wish the actual loot during the story playthrough was better, but here we are.
Copy. Hold the line, Sergeant.
The Division is a looter shooter, one of those keywords there being shooter, and I'm so good at writing. The gameplay very heavily emphasizes the use of cover. Without it, you're basically a dead man. I do think this is laxed a bit in Division 2, but in this game, you must simply, tactically, and carefully use cover every chance you get, which is basically all the time. The shooting mechanics are fine, they don't really do anything too special, but the different guns you get to use do offer up some nice variety in terms of feel. The shotguns feel powerful and impactful. Sniper shots connect with a very satisfying sound for headshots. The ARs and LMGs are also very fun to use, and the SMGs are quick and snappy. There's a lot to choose from, and you can really form your own playstyle. Personally, I was almost always running one AR for close to medium range encounters, and one marksman rifle for the long range ones. Different weapons will have different strengths. These change, of course, based on the properties your gun rolls with. For example, you can find an LMG with extra ammo and reload speed. One of the biggest aspects tied to your weaponry are the mods. Mods are basically attachments that you can place on your gun that augment it in some form or fashion. For example, you can put on a suppressor for better accuracy, a different magazine type to hold more ammo and reload faster, or even a different type of scope for more headshot damage. This lets you craft a weapon that is really unique to your playstyle. That being said, the game does try to maintain a sense of realism by not allowing you to go too wild. You can't place a sniper scope on a pistol, unfortunately. The skills add another layer to combat. You can equip up to 3 skills, each skill specializing in some particular thing. For example, the tech wing skills let you use a turret or a seeker mine. The medical wing has some different healing abilities, and the security one is all about defense. These skills are absolutely crucial in combat, and that's something that I learned the hard way. I always had a healing ability equipped, and would swap between the turret and the seeker mine when needed. It's worth mentioning that each skill has 4 different modifiers that can be unlocked, changing the ability by adding a new firing mode or augmenting it to heal past your current health pool, and so on. The skills you choose don't matter too much in solo, but if you're playing group content, you'll likely need some kit that doesn't just aid you, but also those around you. Looter games are typically pretty easy, especially for the story portion. Then, once you reach the end game, things start to ramp up, right? Diablo has a super easy story, Destiny has an easy story, Borderlands has an easy story, and so on. The Division does not follow that archetype at all. I'm gonna be honest here, The Division was a difficult game for me, like unexpectedly so. I died so many times, more times than I can even remember. See, I went into the game thinking, oh, okay, I can blast my way through these enemies with very little problem. This wasn't the case at all. Even the most mundane enemy can become a real problem if you're not careful. This was a hard lesson I had to learn. Often I was asking myself what I was doing wrong. Why am I having so much trouble getting past what should be an easy encounter? The answer in the end was very simple. I was playing the game the wrong way. I wasn't using the cover the way I should, I wasn't using my skills often, and I was slowly relying on my ability to kill as fast as possible, which in itself is a challenge when playing on controller, at least for me. I'll admit, I hated the difficulty, and mixed with a lackluster loot progression, I was getting ready to scrap this whole video, but I kept trying. I learned the ins and outs and really started pacing myself instead of just trying to blow through these encounters. This made me far more successful, and I gained a new appreciation for the type of game that The Division really is. It's far more tactical than one would assume just from looking at the gameplay. The levels are obviously designed to aid you, there's more than enough cover to move around without getting shot. My aggressive playstyle just wasn't working early on. The enemies in this game are also interesting enough. My personal favorite are these dudes who rush you with a melee weapon for some reason, despite you wielding a gun. What I especially liked was how the different factions that you come across approach combat. The Rikers are aggressive, they charge you at times, and they aren't super organized, and the fights with them are pretty chaotic. The Cleaners approach you slowly, but they will always try to get up close and personal with their flamethrowers. The LMB are by far the most tactical and hard to go up against. There's some paramilitary group that attempts to flank you and suppress you while slowly closing in on you. It's very cool to see, and you have to be extra careful when going up against them. This unique approach to enemy design was very smart on Ubisoft's part. This was expanded and improved on quite a bit in The Division 2, but it's interesting to see its roots here. I want to quickly touch on the Dark Zone. This was and still is a huge part of what makes The Division The Division. It's kind of weird how Ubisoft adapted the extractor model over a decade ago and how popular extraction games have become. Sometimes they are ahead of the game. The Dark Zone was interesting to me. It was fun, it was tense, but it was also kind of annoying. I didn't venture into the Dark Zone until I finished the game. I know, what a weirdo. But I figured at this point, everyone is already at level 30 and has the best gear, so if I ever did run into a player, I stood little to no chance against them. So I waited. Eventually, I did make it to level 30 and went into the Dark Zone, but was only greeted with PvE content. I killed and killed, but every time I went for an extraction, I would get ambushed by so many enemies that it was just not possible for me to get out. This made me start wondering if it's even possible to extract solo, but I kept trying and eventually did extract the gear that I looted. I thought the Dark Zone was fine, like it didn't seem all that crazy and didn't hold my interest for too long, but I definitely see the appeal for players into this type of content. I want to quickly talk about the progression in this game as a whole. Each district in this game has its own level. This level is not a suggestion, but instead a hard requirement. See, many looter games I've played have some sort of level gating. Enemies that you encounter could be a couple of levels above you, but you can still kill them pretty handedly. This is not the case in The Division at all. If you wander into an area with enemies that are more than 2 levels above you, you will die. There is no chance to kill them. I like this. This is how I would also design a leveling system if it was ever up to me. There has always been a big discussion centered around level scaling. Basically, if I'm level 20, then the game around me is also level 20. The world scales, the enemy scale, and the threat of any real challenge is pretty much non-existent. Think Elder Scrolls Online, for example. Some players like this. Me, I hate it. I want that challenge. I want to wander into the wrong area and get obliterated because I know I can come back later and see just how strong I've gotten. The Division masters this in the base game, but this also really ramps up the difficulty. For example, there were many times I was only 1 level below the required level for a mission, and I was constantly getting my ass kicked, leading me to exit the mission and grind a bit more. This extended my playtime substantially. I'd have to go around completing a number of encounters or side missions that would grab me enough XP to hit that next level. There was, however, a nice sense of progression when I came back and had little to no trouble with that same mission or that same enemy. Level scaling in The Division does exist. For example, if I'm level 25, the earlier areas in the game, which were once only level 1 to 3, are now scaled up to level 20. This is good. This is great use of level scaling, allowing me, the player, to go back and complete side missions and kill enemies while being rewarded with enough XP that makes it worth it and not a waste of time. Outside of leveling, progression is also tied to 3 different categories of power, those being firearms, stamina, and electronics. These 3 different stats are tied to your gear. The higher number associated with that stat, the more weapon damage you'll deal, the more health you'll have, or the more skill power you'll dish out. The final progression system is the 3 different wings that I've already talked about: tech, medical, and security. You unlock new abilities, modifiers, perks, and talents through this skill tree. This is all to say that there are a ton of progression systems in the Division, all of which are solid to great in my opinion. I got addicted to the endgame loop. It was bad. I knew I had enough footage to make this video, but I couldn't stop playing the freaking game. The endgame in the Division is big enough to keep you busy. The dailies and weeklies are challenges you can complete while casually playing the game, get 10 headshots, kill 100 enemies, and so on. The reward for doing this is often a cache filled with loot. The endgame largely revolves around replaying missions on harder difficulties for greater rewards. You can replay the missions as many times as you want on greater difficulties, and each tier that you go through grants you better rewards. Speaking of tiers, I should probably mention this now. World tiers are a huge thing. Basically, each world tier presents greater rewards, but also harder enemies. Each tier has a certain gear score. For example, 0 to 100 would represent tier 1, 101 to 200 would represent tier 2, and there are 5 total tiers to climb through. Now, the Division has had 3 expansions, each of which added a bit to the endgame. The survival DLC is basically a survival mode where you need to eat, drink, and stay warm while still dealing with the enemies. This mode is both PvP and PvE. It's a solid mode, but it didn't personally capture me that much. The Last Stand DLC was the final DLC, and this one added an additional PvP mode. I'm not too interested in PvP, so I didn't give it a shot, to be completely honest. However, the Underground DLC did me in. This was by far my favorite endgame activity. Essentially, it's a bunch of different rooms that ask you to complete some objective, like eliminating enemies or protecting some objective, and so on. You run through a number of these rooms that culminate with a boss fight, and that fight often drops some really nice rewards. I did this over and over and over again. I couldn't stop because I was so addicted to the loot chase for some reason. I could easily see myself playing this for another 15 to 25 hours, but I had to put it down to write this damn script. I love the underground mode and will be going back to it as soon as possible. There are also incursions. These are basically raid-like activities, but I couldn't find a party for this, and honestly, it's probably a good thing because my gear was likely not raid ready. So where do the majority of players spend their time in endgame these days? Well, it seems like the Dark Zone seems to be the majority of where players are hanging out. As mentioned before, I like the Dark Zone, but I'm more of a PvE type player in these types of games. For what it's worth though, the Division's endgame still offers up plenty for you to do. Honestly, I didn't expect to get as much enjoyment as I did out of the Division. I thought I would come in for a quick 10-hour playthrough, make a quick video, and be on my way. But no, the game captivated me for some reason. The loop of exploring New York, finding things to do, completing endgame activities kept me coming back for more and more. I can see why the Division still has a healthy and active population, and for the foreseeable future, I will be a part of it. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing.